What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today, and we got Lambros and Thavas, so everybody's excited. And I know I'm a bit late, but we've been getting a lot of reveals for Aqua Force this whole week, so a lot has been changing. A lot of our first thoughts and a lot of our revelations have been changed too. So I just wanted to kind of go from where the prior reveals with Denis up to the Lambros and Thavas reveal, and even now that we got the new Grade 1 reveal, and match them together and honestly talk about some of those key things that at first it seemed like Lambros was underwhelming, but in practice we found out some ways to help solve that puzzle. Like Wavenation has described in his video, somewhere in this video, he described that we got a puzzle, and honestly we're trying to solve this puzzle to make Lambros actually a really good grade 4 to even go into in the first place. And I'll talk about a little bit about that, but first I want to start out with the reveals a little bit. So let's go with Denis in that grade 3 that were revealed a couple days ago. The grade 3 isn't as important right now, so I won't really cover much about her. Honestly, if there's something that you guys know and I don't know that's worth mentioning, leave it down in the comments and let me know. But honestly, it's copywriter Denis. And Denis is actually the retrain from the grade 2 10K that we got back in the G era trial deck with Thavas in the first place. So it's kind of cool. And out the blue that we saw a retrain, because honestly, a lot of us were thinking Magnum Assault, we were thinking of Adelaide. But yeah, Denis, who would have thought, right? His skill is Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle skill. You can rest one of your rearguards and actually call the top card of your deck onto Rearguard Circle, and it's a hard once per turn. So even if you had a second copy, you could only do it that one time. So very key. A lot of key things. There's no Counterblast, there's no Soul Blast involved, so honestly, it's like, oh, rest something, call something. You're building a field, essentially. And before Lambros and Thavas were actually revealed, we were thinking of maybe Raban support. We were thinking maybe other variants in premium that might be utilizing this card. I thought of even maybe Blue Wave, for example, where Blue Wave has to mitigate that -1 or -2 if you're planning to do Flood Hazard turn that first stride. And so it's like, ooh, that might be useful. Especially if you can rest cards that honestly go away. And that could be like a Brutal Trooper, the crit trigger that lets you draw in Blue Wave, or even like a Petros that goes into Soul and draws you a card, or the premium collection version of Petros, the right Brave Shooter, for example, and then it goes into Soul and you get your card back. So you're not really hurting your setup if you do it right with the right cards. It's almost like Navigator and Night Rose when you rest a Rough Seas Banshee, and the Rough Seas Banshee goes into Soul and draws you a card. So you can really play around it in premium. And honestly, it kind of believed us, or led us into believing that this could reveal some of Thavas and Lambros' skill with resting. And that's what we got, to be honest. But before I dive into those two, there's Nikki. Copywriter Nikki is our Stride Fighter back in G era, retrained as a new card, and it's really a Rearguard Circle skill that he can rest himself, and you can return a normal unit from your drop zone to the bottom of the deck, and you soul charge 1. So this allows us to recycle normal cards, which we couldn't before, which honestly can open the possibilities of something that we haven't thought about, reusing units. A good thing that kind of came to mind is Legion. Legion can honestly take advantage, and when I mean Legion, I mean Ripples, which Ripples can already take can take words are hard, right? Can take advantage of even Denis and now Nikki to build up Saul, but also return some key units that you might want to return and use later on with Legion Unlock, and just build up a field like that point. But the first skill too is that if you ride it on Vanguard Circle, you can check the top 7 for Thavas or Copywriter Denis. So we got our own Shadow Paladin Clone Grade 1 that honestly lets us search for those 2 key cards, the Grade 3 and the Grade 2 that are meant to go along. So right off the back, that was the stream, and so it's like, alright, this is going to lead us into Thavas. And they reveal Thavas, and Thavas has 2 skills. The first skill is that you retire one of not retire, you rest one of your units, and you can choose up to 1 unit on your opponent's end and retire it. It's a once per turn, which is really nice because honestly, Thavas had that retire aspect that made things a little easier to do. Other units just have these crazy conditions that are make it not worth it to run in a build to retire a card at that point. But Thavas is just rest one, retire something, which leads into the next skill. And the next skill is that at the beginning of your battle phase, if you have 3 or more rested rearguards, you can discard a card, fetch Lambros from your deck, and write it as stand, and he gets 10k and an extra drive check for the turn. And at the end of the turn, retire that grade 4. It's not specifically Lambros, so any grade 4, but at the moment it's just Lambros. Retire that grade 4 and actually rewrite a grade 3 from your soul onto Vanguard Circle. So you rewrite the same Thavas most of the time, and you get another Excel Circle if you think about it. So you get 2 Excel Circles in that one turn, one at the very end, of course, but if you're in XL2, you draw another card. So you draw an advantage that this card is mitigated by just riding and doing an XL2 circle when you draw that card. So it helps with that too. The rested rear guards is really the key. And that's part of the reason that I kind of wanted to dive into this is that, all right, so I rest 3 rear guards, which we got cards. We got Denis, we got Nikki. We even got Penguin, if we go back to the prior sets, that rested self to give power. And honestly, we got Agias that we just got revealed last week that did a counterblast, choose two of your units, rest them, and then it gets 10k. And honestly, those cards just seem like, oh wow, that makes a lot more sense with Thavas right now, just to be able to stride into Lambros, which makes things a lot more sense. Whereas, like, why would you make a card like Agias that kind of works with Revon, but we don't even play Denis like that, because Denis was similar but didn't cost a counterblast, and now you make Agias, but now it makes sense with Thavas, right? Lambros, and it's the key card that you're going into. So what does Lambros even do? Lambros has 3 skills. The first skill is a hand skill. It counts itself minus grade 1 in the hand if you have a Thavas Vanguard. So it could be a grade 3, which you can call from hand at that point as a rear guard if you really need to at that point. And that's the only use case that I can think of right now. Again, he's a grade 4, but if he's a grade 3, he still counts as a 1 card for stride to pitch, to pay the cost of stride, so that's good. And then the other thing that he also has is that when he is placed onto Vanguard Circle, choose as many as your own rear guards and stand them. So everything that you just rested with prior to setting up Thavas has the opportunity to actually just restand, and you have a new battle phase. Not a new battle phase, but your battle phase actually begins with a full field of standing units if you decide to stand all of them, which can be key. Most of the time you will, but there might be a case where you leave one not standing, for example, just to get some conditions easier with some attack patterns. But that's the key thing, is that it restands this resting units that you tried so hard just to be able to stride in standard. So I think that's very helpful. It makes sense. The third skill is that on attack, you can counterblast 1, soul blast, choose a column and stand up to 2 of your rear guards. And if your opponent has a grade 3 or greater on their Vanguard Circle, then they get plus 5k each. Now, it sounds underwhelming at first. Zay from the Force of the Ocean had mentioned that we had the weakest Lambros clone out of the Lambros clones, and it's Lambros. It's just like, wait, we can only stand 1 column. We can't stand 2 rear guards in any order that we want to. It seemed underwhelming at first, and I was like, you can even check the reveals. We actually got with Senpai, Card for a King, Wavenation, Zay was on there, and I was on there too. You can see our reactions. They're like, okay, we got to do this and that, and you just click on it and you'll see our expressions. So you can skip to ahead where they actually reveal them, and you'll see how our reactions were at first, and we're trying to say, okay, we need to do this and this, and we're susceptible to control, blah, 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 all those mental details. But so that basically forced us to really get into the lab, right, and actually start playtesting, like, okay, how bad is it? Or how good is it, really? We're not just seeing it. And, we're being optimistic, and so we playtested. One of the key things that Force of the Ocean has playtested, and even I started to suspect, you didn't really need Algos, Tidal, or even the new Dragon, Coil Dragon, the restanders, right? And I felt like you needed an Agias that actually may be required to run the deck consistently well, not just because it makes some numbers, but it's like you need to rest stuff to even stride in the first place, so you need that. So I saw Denis being in the lineup, I saw Agias being in the lineup, and I was like, the only other unit that really makes sense might be Coral Soul at that point. You not only need to rest stuff, but you need to get power, because Lambros doesn't even give massive amounts of power to those rear guards. He only gives plus 5. If you played Sharahat in standard, it is a better Lambros clone. Not only that, his other skill gives power to the rear guards for every card in the soul. And honestly, you get to the absurd number that's over 10k. And it's just like, Lambros' 5k is kind of like weak compared to that. So that's where we're coming from at first, but we're playtesting, and obviously you have to really pay attention to what you're trying to accomplish. Right? And so let me describe some play that makes things a little more sense. Like, what are we trying to accomplish with Lambros and Thavas? And that was the biggest thing too, is that before in Gira, we had like 6 good attacks that we can rely to, because we have first, second, third, 4th was our Lambo stride, restand 2 rear guards, and hit, and you might have a 7th if you restarted a restander like Tidal or Magnum Assault, right? And honestly, 10K was a bigger deal back then when triggers were 5K. Now it's the exact opposite. We have 10K triggers, but only a 5K power up to the single rear guard. So it made us really reassess what we're trying to accomplish. And I think the most solid and most consistent with some pressure and also advantage gaining back is really going for 5 attacks, with the last 3 being the biggest. So what do I mean by that? So let's say we have our front row. We have Denis, we have Agias, then our Vanguard, and then of course we have maybe a Coral Assault, right? So with this being our front row, and then our back row, behind the Coral Assault might be a Baragios, but ideally, let's say Nerissa, right? Let's stick with Nerissa. And then we have a card like Nikki, and then if you have something behind the Vanguard, great. Let's say another Nikki or something, or Baragios, for example. But point is, you have Denis, Agias with some booster like Nikki, then the Vanguard, and then you have the other column, which is Coral Assault, and the booster, let's say Nerissa. So your setup is going to use 2 counterblasts. One for Lambros, one for Agias. So you want to rest with Thavas first. Let's say Nerissa, right? So you rest Nerissa, you can retire one of the rear guards, then you can proc Nerissa. And so she'll draw, she'll Soul Blast 1 and restand herself and get plus 10k, right? Then if you use Denis to rest her or another unit, they can call something, and it could be the Agias, it could be the Coral Assault, or it could be something for this unit. It doesn't matter. But point is, you rest a unit, and then boom, right there. That's 1 rested unit so far. Then Nikki will rest itself, so you have 2. But with that, you can also restand the Nerissa from the Denis skill still. So then you proc Nerissa a 2nd time, so you get another 10k. Because Nerissa's not once per turn, just so you know. And then the thing is that Agias will rest 2. And so that's where you can take advantage of actually resting 2 more rear guards, one of them being Nerissa, and then Nerissa again can Soul Blast to actually get another 10k power. Now you're seeing where I'm going with this. So you end up with 2 Nikkis rested, or a Penguin, or the other card that Agias rested. However you end up with those units being rested, you just need 3. And if you can restand Nerissa multiple times, that column is getting bigger and bigger. So what you do with the attack pattern now is you have Denis in the Excel Circle for 14k. Then the second wave can be Agias with a booster. Agias will be 19k by himself, and then any booster, let's say Nikki, it's just the 8k. So that makes it a 27k column, which actually hits over a trigger as well. And if you're hitting against, like, let's say Excel or Protect, or 12k base, so you're forcing them to drop a 20k shield at that point too. They can't just drop a 15k trigger at that point. Then you have the big column that you have there, and if you have Coral Assault with the Nerissa, Coral Assault is going to see 4 other rested units at that point too. So he'll get the plus 15k. Nerissa in this example got plus 30k, I believe, if I did my math right. So this column is 9 plus 8, which makes 17k. And then overall got Nerissa 3 times, so that's a plus 30k. So that makes it 47, and then 47 plus the 15 from Coral Assault, that makes about 62. So a really big number. And honestly, it's like, whoa, this is cool. So you're hitting 62k on your 3rd battle. And then your 4th battle is your actual Vanguard that does triple drive in standard. It's 25k base because it got powered up, and if you have a booster, it's 33 or 38 if you have Baragios. So it makes a really big number. And then you restand the Coral Assault, and you restand the Nerissa, and you plop triggers wherever you want, on the Vanguard or on that rear guard column that has restood. So that's very key. Then you can attack as the 5th battle with that same column, and if they're a grade 3, guess what? That column gets an additional 10k. So now they're at 72k, and 72k is a key number because that means they have to drop more than 2 critical sentinels, because 30 plus 30 is 60, and if they're 12k base, that makes 72. Guess what? You're matched. They have to drop more shield at that point. So they PG it, or they drop a lot of cards at that point. And then at the end of the turn, you clean up your board. So you retire, draw 1 from the Excel 2 generation. Baragios and, not Baragios, Nerissa and Coral Assault will go into Soul, draw you 2 new cards to basically have a decent sized hand. And guess what? Next turn, you rinse and repeat. So that's one of the things that I'm finding now, and you can make some of these better numbers that really force out this key guards at those last 3 attacks. So that way you can maximize your effectiveness, but also be consistent on what you're trying to accomplish. I think cards in the grade 1 slot are definitely going to be Nerissa for sure. She's going to be MVP. There's going to be Agias for just because, you know, consistent with the grade 3s. If you really think about it, Thavas is really a 4 grade 3 deck, just like Ravan. So you definitely need that grade 3 consistency with Agias if you don't draw into Thavas. The other thing is also just having an extra 13k booster to make those numbers bigger too. You can mess with the numbers. I'm not sure if I'll make a chart later on that actually suppress certain thresholds. Like for example, I think if you had a 30k shield on your 12k Vanguard, so that makes 42. You can easily make the 42k mark also as well. So that forces more than just a crit sentinel at that point too, which is also key at that point. So honestly, you can make these numbers. You have a pressure turn, you're refunding advantage, and it kind of reminds me of Revan. You have to commit, do your turn, and then swoop up your field and draw new cards. Kind of like Revan. The other thing that kind of reminds me is like Night Rose. Night Rose does 5 attacks, and then your field disappears, and then you have to rebuild the next turn, which is basically what you're trying to accomplish. The same thing with Thavas and Lambros. So I think it's underwhelming at first when you first look at it at paper, then in practice, as you're messing with the cards, especially, you have to think differently. You have to be deliberate in the early game, because if you don't, you won't be able to do the stride turn, and that is a bad thing. If you cannot do Thavas into Lambros, you don't do anything. Like, you just die, I guess, at the next at that point, the lack of a better term. And even my friends at Force of the Ocean realized that, like, if you can't even do the stride turn, you're pretty much done. There's nothing else that you can really do in that deck. So it's very geared to that same strategy, and that can be good or bad for certain situations. But the early game isn't that as aggressive, so you don't even need Tidal, Algos, or even Coil Dragon to really that. And again, those cards don't really further this the synergy of what Lambros demands. You don't care about the number of battles. You don't care about certain pokes or anything like that. And honestly, with the power-ups that Lambros doesn't give as much, you really respect Agias more, and also you demand more of Coral Soul and Nerissa to really make up for that part at that point. 5 attacks is still really good in standard, honestly. Even in premium, if you can get 5, 6 very solid attacks, you're in a good place. Anything after that, it's usually a weaker poke, and it's not really worth it. And I found out through Night Rose. So take my word on it. But other than that, I just wanted to end this video with, we got a new grade 1. Todolis, or however you pronounce it. It's another Kelpie Rider, but honestly, if it's rusted by the other ability of another card, then you can Counter Blast 1 and give 10k to another card. And some of you are thinking, that actually may solve the problem. You may be able to play V-Tidal, honestly. V-Tidal can actually restand at the end, minus 5k. It really gets negated by the Lambros power-up, so the 10k might be actually helpful. Then you stack triggers. It's all good, but the thing that I've always wanted to know with Aqua Force and other decks is that you play without counting on your triggers. If you count on your triggers, then your strategy may not actually fall through, and you might just lose the game. If you're playing your deck without assuming triggers, and triggers are kind of like the extra, then that works better. So that way your strategy stays the same no matter what. If your opponent damage check the trigger, you're already prepared for that, right? And you're better off in that situation than just hoping for a trigger to stack on V-Tidal and really try to take advantage with that grade 1 given it power, because it's not worth it in my point. And that Counter Blast can be saved for Agias and Lambros, because every turn you're using 1 to 2 CB, you have the Penguin to refund one of them too. So be deliberate with your CB. Counter Blast management is very key, so definitely keep that in mind. So I don't think that grade 1 may have a place, but then we still have more reveals that might change things up a bit, but we don't know. But as far as we know it, we have a decent solid lineup that we kind of all can agree on, and honestly a strategy that we're all starting to realize that Nerissa is actually going to be a big part of Lambros, to be honest. And Denis and the other cards as well, just to be able to be consistent with it too. So I think with that, there's also the premium talk, but I think I'm going to mess with that later. What it does bring is that your first grade 3 turn is very solid if you do go off. You get 5 attacks that are solid, and if your cards are just right, you'll get that advantage back. And in premium, that could be key, because if you have a solid grade 3 turn that you have to go into and give up the first stride, then that might be the key. If not, then we just try to compete for the first stride and go from there at that point. It just really depends on the matchup. Not every matchup is DI, where you just get slaughtered if you give them CB early on. But premium is premium, right? So it's a whole different animal. So anyway, that's for standard mainly. Like I was saying, And with that, amigos, you know, I give all the credit that Force of the Ocean. They did a lot of playtesting yesterday. It's been a busy week for me, so I thank those guys. Zay, Cardfight King, Senpai, Wavenation, Avataru, Ocean Dragon Lord, and so many of the others on the Force of the Ocean, like Shiga, Naraf, and Bao. Those are great players, Aqua 4 players, and I'm grateful to be on the Discord with them, just to be able to mastermind with them about Aqua Force, to help you guys really get you thinking in the right direction with Aqua Force, so that way you guys can enjoy the clan but also do well at events or even casual play with friends or anything like that. So alright guys, I talked a lot. I'm signing out. See you guys. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below. See ya. Bye.